We're not making you wait, folks. We are back on Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220 KHTS. It's the Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John, the radio digest version of the Santa Clarita Gazette. All you need to know to be in the know.
Yeah, and we've increased our listenership, Doug.
Outstanding.
Yes, my daughter is working with Phoenix Fire Helmets. Cool place. I went out there, visited. They actually have like a almost like a museum of fire helmets.
Really?
It was fascinating. And I went out there. There were a bunch of good people. They're probably sitting around listening to us, eating lunch.
Cool.
So, yeah, there you go.
All right. Shout out to you guys.
There's about that probably doubled our listenership right there.
Don't go there, John.
All right, it's time. This is your birthday present. Bringing on Rob Lewis to talk about
what could be better than this.
Rob, set him straight.
Yeah, well,
you're there, right?
If I want to say, hey, I missed you guys.
Yeah, I know. That's right.
I was kind of getting lonely.
Aw.
Robert Patrick Lewis is with us.
Our national correspondent.
Love Me When I'm Gone. Rob, what about the new book? Where are we at?
So I was ready to release it a few weeks ago. It's going through the final round of editing. You know, it's one of the things you get a little gun shy because once it's out there, it's one of those things you can't take back.
No turning back.
Yeah. So we're putting it through one absolutely final last round of editing, and should be out within the week.
So are you going to say the same thing next week, or it'll be out?
I've been saying that for the last month.
I know we weren't going to say anything, but that's what's been happening.
Yeah, that's the problem with it really is. It's one of those things where I was ready 2 weeks ago, and a very close friend of mine went, "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it's ready?" And I went, "Okay, one more time."
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, Doug didn't believe you. I did, of course.
Yeah.
Doug was calling you a liar and all kinds of nasty things. But I
but it was off the air.
I said, "Oh yeah, was I supposed to tell him that?" I set him straight for you. All right, so Rob, let me ask you a question. I read your article in the Gazette, and you make a valid point about religion and fundamentalists and terrorists and things like that, and the distinction between the two. But and you actually made a very good point about most, you meet good people and bad people, but isn't it the fundamentalist term that we're using that's bad, that creates, somebody who's a Islamic fundamentalist?
I think we are. I think you and I are. I think people that pay attention to this are, but unfortunately there's a lot of people out there that don't make that distinction.
Okay.
And they try to take one person or a couple people, a couple bad apples, and ruin the whole tree. And it's unfortunate because, you can look at anything. And I've heard, even in special forces, we had this saying where they say not every Muslim's a terrorist, but every terrorist a Muslim. And you know what? That's not actually true. There are a lot of, if you're going under the banner of terrorism, there are a lot of acts of terrorism that have been committed by other types of people, and you can't brand the largest per capita religion in the world based on a few jerks.
Okay.
We can't do that with ours either, because Christianity's got some of the not nicest human beings in the world too.
No, we can go back in time. Yeah, exactly. No, I don't have a problem with that. It was one of those where it's these fundamentalist ideas that, and I don't know whether they're actually Islamic or Muslim ideas. I think they're more interpretations of world events through religious eyes, sort of.
Yeah, and that's another problem is that when you get religion, you get to a point, especially, and here is a huge problem with the Muslim religion, that, I will say Islam has a tendency to be the largest in countries where the illiteracy rate is through the roof. Right? So in Pakistan, you have these madrasas where kids learn to read, and I'm doing very severe air quotes right here, read by memorizing the Quran, just reading it over and over and over. And so when you have these people that are highly uneducated, not very intelligent, most of them can't read for their own, they're taking 100% of what they get from their imam, their religious leader.
Exactly.
And if that guy doesn't like something and he wants them to be bloodthirsty terrorists, well, that's what they're going to be, because that's what they hear every day. So that's just, and they're a lot more devout than the average, the average American Christian.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, walking through a Muslim country, if you've never been there, walking through the streets of anywhere in Iraq or Afghanistan or northern Africa, when it's time to call the prayer, everything stops. For us heretics walking along the street going, where'd everybody go?
Exactly. But do you think that lack of understanding of that mindset is probably, to me, it's the biggest problem of America's policy towards those countries?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we create enemies that we wouldn't have had in the first place because we have a tendency to just use these broad brushstrokes and go after everybody when, in reality, there are some very good people. I mean, it's an enormous religion, so of course you're going to have good people, you're going to have bad people, just like every religion. But when we use these broad brushstrokes and, Joe Schmo, the average American, goes, well, all Muslims are terrorists.
Right.
That starts creating this animosity that doesn't need to be there. And in reality, we could be using a lot of their own community to help us police these bad apples, but we're not, because we're turning the good parts of their community against us too.
So, Robert, how do you think the president is handling each one of these terrorist events? He's coming under lots of criticism for not denouncing them strongly enough, not doing enough, not going to France. What is your take on all that?
Yeah, well, and see so this is where I kind of have this dual hat of every once in a while somebody can accuse me of being a dirty hippie, and then I come right back to the very extremely staunchly conservative. I think it's piss poor, and pardon my French, I think the way that he's responding to these things, it's showing that he is nothing more than a wet napkin. He has no spine. He draws a line in the sand. This is our line in the sand. If you cross this, we will retaliate, and then it gets crossed, and you kind of back up a little bit. Okay, here's my new line in the sand, and he's just backpedaling every time. And unfortunately, I can tell you from a lot of experience working in these countries and working against, fighting radicals and fundamentalists, it is a very serious thing with the Islamic religion. It's a very male, testosterone-driven religion, and anything like this is seen as weakness, and it shows a lack of respect, and they will jump all over you. The second you back down, it's considered weakness, and it's like piranhas.
Do you think he's reluctant to speak out or take more action because of the influences he has,
100%.
In his cabinet or his staff? Because that's what the reoccurring theme is that you hear. He's got Muslim advisors.
Not just his advisors, and that's just scratching the surface. I'm a big fan of Dinesh D'Souza. And if you look at his actual history and where he's had his methodology and his raising for his entire life, fundamentally to his very core, he believes these things. He believes that America is evil. I truly believe that. I think that he is one of these people that would rather have a diverse cabinet than a good cabinet. You know what I mean? He's more concerned with making sure that he fits all these holes with somebody that looks and fits the right percentage of whatever than somebody that's competent. And unfortunately, you get what we're getting.
Yeah. All right, Rob, we got more questions for you. You're going to hang on after the break, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, great. All right, you're listening to Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John. And our we can't call you foreign correspondent, can we? We can't do
National.
That. National correspondent, Robert Patrick Lewis.
I can have an accent.
Yeah, exactly. You can be our foreign correspondent next time. That sounds pretty good. Anyway, you're on the Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John on AM-1220 KHTS, Santa Clarita's hometown station.
We are back, everybody, on Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM-1220 KHTS. It's the Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John. We have with us our national correspondent, John.
It's not a foreign correspondent.
Robert Patrick Lewis, the author of Love Me When I'm Gone, and the soon-to-be-released name of the book is...
The Pact.
The Pact.
The
Even
Pact.
I can't wait for this book.
I'm old, remember? I can't remember.
I'm not allowed to be in the Pact. I've got to be outside the gates. I can't be a Wolverine.
Robert, I'm changing gears here. You ready?
Yes, sir.
The new Congress. We had what we considered a landslide election in November for the Republican Party. What's the first thing the Republicans do before all their new reinforcements come in January? Right? In December, they pass a budget bill for the whole fiscal year for 2015. I have never been so politically irritated in my life. Were you?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of all those jokes and memes that go around Facebook that say congressmen should have to wear suits like NASCAR drivers so we know who sponsors them.
Good one.
There we go.
It would be just blatantly obvious. I actually wanted to start a website called politicalaccountability.com, where it tracks what they say during their campaign and then what they actually do in office and who they get money from, and do a spreadsheet which actually shows a chart what they were saying in their campaign, who gave them money at what point, and then when what they were saying changed. Because I have a very strong thing that if I say computers are the devil, and then a lobbyist from Apple finds that and gives me $1 million, all of a sudden the next day I'm going to go, computers are our best friends. And I think it would be great if we could track that and show it via metrics, black and white. Here's exactly how spineless your politician is. Here's how easily.
Okay, here's part of the problem. Yes, I can agree. I agree with you that spineless is probably a little harsh from my standpoint. A lot of it is, and I feel bad for the freshmen coming in and the new people coming in because they don't know how the system works. And a lot of times unfortunately, the system is in place. Now, how do you go about changing the system? That's a whole nother hour-long show that we could probably do. But you almost need people who are willing to at least chip away at it. not go in and just completely trash it. And I think that's the problem. We don't have anybody who's really chipping away at it, or at least saying, look, I don't agree with this, but I'm doing this because I want this in exchange.
Right.
You know,
I think the only way to really get that is to go away from career politicians.
yeah.
It's the only way to do it, because they're not just fighting for what they believe in, they're fighting for their job. And you have someone who's a career politician that, they did political science or whatever they did through all of college, law school, then they interned, and they've just been doing politics. They have no marketable talents outside of politics, so they're fighting for their livelihood.
Right.
And of course, most of them go in decently endowed, and then they come out mega millionaires. And who wants to give that up?
And they don't know how much a gallon of milk costs. Remember?
Right.
That's the one that always cracks me up. How much is a gallon of milk? When was the last time you carried an ATM card, President Obama? You have to pay the extra $3 because you went to the wrong bank.
I guess I was so hopeful after November's election. I thought we'd really see some change. And what I'm seeing now is compromise and unwillingness to really take a strong stand. And, there are even some wavering on the Keystone Pipeline. And obviously when it came time for to elect a new Speaker of the House, I thought for sure we'd be able to get enough votes to get Boehner out of there. And it just didn't happen. And some of the guys that like a guy named Kurt Gowdy, who I thought was a staunch conservative, voted for Boehner, and I was very disappointed in that. I just don't get, and maybe it's because, like John said, we don't know what goes on. We don't know the inner workings. Our representative here, Mr. Steve Knight, he went over there. He voted for Boehner, but was he coerced? Did he know any better? We just don't know.
Well, and there's a great saying that it's a great business saying, but I guess it goes into politics, it goes into a lot of things. I'm not going to die on that mountain.
Exactly.
Right? Which means you've got to set up and say, here's what I'm going to fight. And then everything else, you make your most important things, and everything else is a give and get. You've got to give a little bit to get a little bit.
Right.
You've got to owe a lot of people a lot of favors to get a lot of favors from a lot of other people on your major issues.
So Robert, were you as enthusiastic as Doug was when the new Congress coming in?
Not at all. I've pretty much lost all respect or hope for politicians in the United States until there's significant reform.
Right.
As long as there's money in politics, as long as that's the driving force, as long as our elections are exponentially more expensive, which is, I'm sorry, but if they want to keep their job, or even if somebody has the highest sense of ethics and morals, to get into that job and make a change is going to require a lot of money. So they got to sell a lot of their opinion.
Yeah.
And they got to do a lot. And so unfortunately, you can have the best intentions.
And you can still maintain those intentions. That's part of the problem is I can go in and be a conservationist. I'm all for national parks, and everything I vote for is national parks, and have not a problem with that. But my vote, that's one aspect, one small, tiny little aspect of this entire process.
Yeah.
And everything else is for sale.
Right, exactly. And it's for sale for some big bucks.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem.
So, Rob, with your pessimistic outlook on government and the Congress, what is your thoughts on the election in 2016? Can our side have a guy that could make a difference, or you just think it's not going to matter?
Honestly, I really am a big fan of this political cartoon that I saw, I think, during the 2012 elections, where there are, it doesn't have a specific candidate. It's got left and right, Republican, Democrat. Somebody in the audience goes, hey, look, the Republican has a hand behind him. He's just a puppet. And somebody else in the audience goes, look, the Democrat's got a hand behind him. He's just a puppet. And then it kind of fades back, and it shows the same guy is holding both puppets, one in either hand. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's the reality. That's what it is.
Exactly.
It really doesn't matter who we are, because at the end of the day, all of their kind of key issues are the same, and they're eroding a lot of our ability to make a good future for ourselves and our families.
Exactly.
It seems like they're putting their own self-interest against that of America, and that's going to change.
All right, real quick, changing the subject completely. You heard about the NASCAR driver whose wife there's a special abuse. The wife is the assassin. Is that even possible?
Again, having lived in that kind of world of intelligence and being a big fan of conspiracy theories, nothing is impossible, man.
Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to know.
She's blonde, she would have access to a lot of really good places.
Okay, good.
You can go back in history and look at World War II. The CIA picked up a lot of famous authors because they had the ability to get into Europe and get in these places normal guys couldn't.
You feel better, John?
I feel better. That was.
She can get anywhere she wants.
All right, Robert. Robert Patrick Lewis, famous author, soon to be even more famous, sir.
And he writes for the Gazette.
Yes, sir. And he's our national correspondent.
Absolutely.
All right, Robert, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys, thank you. Have a great weekend.
You do.
All right, you're listening to Gazette Radio Hour with Doug and John on AM-1220 KHTS, Santa Clarita's hometown station. Back with sports.